guys, welcome to this week's SEO questions asked and answered. Today I'm answering questions, 3 of them, about content. Some about planning, some about structure. I'm Janet Bartoli, SEO thought leader and educator within Expert SEO Masterclass and the lead strategist in Bartoli Consulting Group. So let's get to those questions. This week, question number 1. Do you think it's an outdated idea that you need to churn out new content on a more frequent, regular basis for SEO building? I'm trying to make a big shift in our content creation process in-house so that we are much more intentional by considering buyer's journey and having pieces for each part of the funnel. And of course, doing better keyword/search query analysis for developing those topics. So this new process is making our publishing schedule to be more like 1 blog, 1 resource per month. Is that not enough? So first, I do not think it's an outdated idea to build new content on a more frequent basis. I think the operative word you used was churn. Okay. Now, it implies that your team is just pumping out massive amounts of content, like the days of article spinning. That is outdated. I do not think it's problematic to adjust your internal content creation process as long as it's tied to your internal goals and objectives. Always think about your internal goals and objectives. What are your marketing qualified leads or your MQLs or your sales qualified leads? What are those? What do they look like? I'm always up for adjusting the process if it doesn't appear to be functioning or it's not efficient and it's not working to achieve your intended goals and objectives. The question of the change in your publishing schedule to go from 1 blog or to go to 1 blog, 1 resource per month, and whether it's sufficient from an SEO standpoint, it's too vague a question, really. Instead, you have to think through your content resources. Can you establish good quality content? Quality content is far more important than the amount of content that gets produced. Quality is always more important than quantity. And that goes for many things in SEO. Same thing for links. Quality over quantity. All right. Also, just as a side note, you might want to consider reviewing your current content strategy. Will it need to change in any way? Will you need to adapt it? Does it need to look different in the next 3 to 6 months? Adjust the process, definitely, but you might also want to adjust your strategy as well. Okay, next question. My client's blog is currently unstructured, similar content, and a lot of it has been made without any real consideration for SEO. Surprise, surprise. Should I optimize each piece of content for the keyword it's ranking for, most and/or most volume? Little stuck. Okay, so you will likely encounter this way more often than not. Sounds like a content strategy was never established. It's also not uncommon that one has never been established. So many will just haphazardly create content in a blog without thinking about structure, intents, or how the content fits within the larger buyer journey. So to start with, assuming you haven't done so already, I would definitely conduct a full content audit using a piece of SEO technology like Ahrefs, or if you're on the enterprise side, Conductor Searchlight, something that will help organize and process a full view of all of your content. You could also, of course, use SEMrush. They have a content analyzer in there that might be useful as well. Next, identify who are your personas or the ideal avatars. If you should really notice throughout your content if you're really meeting and achieving the intended goals that your content has for the search query or the intent someone has to come into your site. Making sure that they're aligned is really key. Now, if you haven't really kind of thought through the personas, you should. Have at least 1 persona. Generally speaking, 1 is better than none. But if you can, 2 or 3, the max, is always good to have as well. Just really understanding who are these people, what content are they looking for, how can you help them throughout the course of the buyer journey. Then evaluate all your content, okay? Are any of them getting any traffic? How old are some of these pieces of content? Are they older than 6 months old? Are they a few years old and they're just never getting any traffic? In these kinds of cases, you might want to 301 redirect that piece of content to a more relevant topic or category area where that may be generating more traffic, but always think of relevance. You don't want to 301 redirect a piece of content in your blog to the homepage, okay? So if it's not getting any traffic, it's not engaging or meeting the needs of your readers, you want to consolidate, maybe weed out some of that content. Then think about your visitors. Always think about your visitors first, not the search engines. You can avoid getting stuck when you take that approach. Then once you've identified all the content you have left, then it's just a matter of really kind of organizing it, top, middle, bottom of the funnel. From there, you'll have an idea in terms of where the content gaps exist, assuming you do have content gaps, and you probably do. So one of the ways that I like to look at this is in terms of my competitors. Look at your direct competitors. What are your direct competitors providing in the way of content across the different phases of the buyer journey that your site is not? That's how you can also kind of create that gap analysis. Make sure you conduct that competitive analysis fairly often. I generally like to do it at least twice a year. You need to know what your competitors are doing at all times and what they're providing. Establish really a full understanding as to why you do need to create new content. Creating content for the sake of content is just not a real good strategy. Always have it fit within your overall content plan and making sure that you address all phases of the buyer journey. And then you should be pretty good, off to a good start. Question number 3. I have a question about supporting blogs for cornerstone content and the concern over keyword cannibalization. If I create a primary piece, let's say it's something like 15 steps to accomplish X, do you think it's wise to take steps 3 to 5 into a separate blog post and then would link to the original piece to get the full picture? Or would that take away SEO potential? Again, what I'm starting to see a trend with a lot of these questions is there's a constant focus on search engine optimization from a search engine first standpoint. You always want to think about your visitors. Would it make sense, even if we didn't even get into addressing the structure of all of this, does it make sense to, if we did a 15 steps to accomplish X, could I maybe take steps 3 and 4 and create separate pieces? Yes, perhaps I could, especially if it's something where you see a gap in your content. This might be a really great opportunity to create really great needed content, and maybe it fits within the buyer journey in some way. So I also want to address the keyword cannibalization thinking. I have heard this so many times from so many different size clients, from the very largest ones as well. And I always answer it in this way. Does it really matter if your keyword is ranking for this piece of content in your site and maybe another piece of content in your site? I mean, at the end of the day, first of all, now that we're post 2013 and Google's Hummingbird, we shouldn't be thinking about the single keyword anyway. Your pages are likely ranking for multiples of keywords. So get out of that thinking. The pre-2013 thinking is outdated. So get out of that way of thinking. So you also want to understand or really think, what is your ultimate goal? Is it really there's a particular topic that you're trying to get many pieces of content in a category to rank for? You want some topical relevance. You want to think about, how can I optimize this particular category, thinking in terms of content structure from a categorical perspective and or themes. And I like to also use, if you think about it in terms of clusters of content under your primary pillar content. Okay, so if we think about, let's say, email marketing, using that as an example, and your cluster content could be email technology. So you could create so many pieces of different email technology based kind of content under that email technology theme lives under your pillar, which is email marketing. So you have to create relationships. That's how Google is seeing your content anyway, and it's how Google's algorithm operates. So we have to, if we have to focus on how Google's algorithm operates, again, it's good to think about those best practices because we don't want to ignore them. We have to always think about the visitor, and the key or the art of SEO is to kind of think of these two together. How can you satisfy both of those? So we understand how Google's algorithm works in form of thinking about content, topical relevance, specific categorization of our content, and then creating sort of these clusters of content that lives underneath each, and then thinking about how does this benefit our user. If the reader comes to the site thinking they're looking for information on email marketing, and so maybe they hit that pillar piece of content and you interlink, which I highly recommend you do, naturally, of course, interlinking pieces, areas in that particular article to other cluster content so that it gives the user a chance and an opportunity to see if this is what you're interested in. We have other pieces of content that are related. So again, if we're talking about email marketing and somebody is reading through the basic structure of email marketing and they read further down and where there's a section maybe on email technology, and then I link that to my email technology section where I talk about the pros and cons of using ActiveCampaign versus ConvertKit, again, now we're helping that visitor even more. And you can see the logical structure of how all that content fits. It just is a natural way to nest it, if you will. So don't really overcomplicate it. Really thinking about your overall plan. How can you help your visitor? How can you get them more of what they came to look for? Ultimately, you want them to stay on your site. You don't want them leaving and going off into, but certainly not back to Google to continue their search because what they found on your site was completely useless. So what you need to really focus on is how can you help that user even more? What kind of good quality content can you produce for them? And ultimately, it's a good thing to bring that visitor in, get them what they need, take care of them, and give them some more other additional content to kind of satisfy any other potentially other asked kinds of questions that they might have. Now, my question for you, have you considered establishing your content strategy for Q1 of next year? If not, now is a really good time to do that. You don't want to be reactionary. You want to get ahead of this early so that you can avoid those kinds of questions that I just answered. You want to plan your content publishing schedule in advance and always think about your visitors, not the search engine first. Remember, Google wants you to provide people with a positive experience. If you push out crap content, you're going to get high bounce rates. You're going to suffer in the way of trust and authority, and especially on that particular subject matter. So plan now, get your writers lined up, publish good quality content. Even if it's only one piece of content a month, it's far better than 1,000 pieces of lame-ass content that serves no one. So I want you to, if you haven't already, think through what your content planning schedule, what is your content strategy for the next or the first 3 months of next year. What is that going to look like? If you haven't done an audit, now is a great time to do an audit to prepare for what that content plan is going to look like. I'm going to take any questions, comment below, ask any questions you have. Let's talk about content. Let's get a little bit more comfortable with it and just stop overanalyzing things, but always create really great content. Now, if you want more of this kind of stuff, I go into this far deeper in greater detail in my Expert SEO Masterclass. There's currently a wait list, and if you're interested, I ask you to join ExpertSEOMasterclass.com. Get on the wait list because we're relaunching a brand new program for you in January, and I'd love to see you there. Thank you. It's Janet Bartoli with Expert SEO Masterclass.